NFL draft is coming up next week, but on today's show, some trade buzz hovering over this franchise around guys like Trey Lance, Brandon Aiyuk, Elijah Mitchell, and Javon Kinlaw. That's what we're discussing on today's San Francisco 49ers Report. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Here are the players that we're going to talk about on an individual basis. Trey Lance, the quarterback, after the report from Ian Rappaport earlier this week that the Niners are fielding calls. Brandon Aiyuk, a lot of teams have been calling the Niners about him because other teams understand this guy, one of the best wide receivers in the game. Javon Kinlaw, since being a first-round pick in the 2020 draft, has been underwhelming and did the signing of Javon Hargrave spell the end of Kinlaw, and could he get dealt? And then Elijah Mitchell is an interesting one as well. I'll expand my thoughts on the soon-to-be third-year running back who's very talented and gifted, but off injured, coming up at the end of the show. Let's begin, though, with Trey Lance. According to Ian Rappaport earlier this week, let's set the foundation here. We've talked about this ad nauseum here on the show, but a lot of people missed it. 49ers have been taking calls, according to Rap Sheet, on teams interested in Trey Lance. And for John Lynch at the NFL Scouting Combine, he had an opportunity to shut down the notion that Lance would not get traded, and he didn't. He said that we're willing to listen to offers about anybody. And according to reports from Grant Cohn, Trey Lance was at the facility this week. This is an organization that has never been short of having drama at the quarterback position, and this is yet another offseason in which there has been drama at the quarterback position. You signed Sam Darnold, Trey Lance trade rumors, and Brock Purdy surgery on that elbow. So yesterday, I hopped on with Jason Brown, former coach of Independence Community College, the coach of the Last Chance U series, as well as former quarterback Sean Salisbury on their show. And we were talking about Trey Lance and the fact that John Lynch had an opportunity to shoot down these trade rumors, and he never did. And Sean Salisbury had said, look, if John Lynch didn't say definitively that we are not trading Trey Lance, that clearly means that the San Francisco 49ers are not in love with Trey Lance. Because you can imagine this. If Howie Roseman, general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles, was asked if the Eagles were going to trade away Jalen Hurts, he'd laugh in your face. If Brandon Beane of the Buffalo Bills was asked, are you going to trade away Josh Allen, he'd laugh in your face. The same for Brett Veach and the Kansas City Chiefs if they were asked and questioned about whether or not they were going to deal Patrick Mahomes. Clearly, San Francisco isn't fully in love with Trey Lance. Instead, John Lynch basically said, we're happy with him. We still think that he can play. He just needs to get healthy. Now, this is what an anonymous general manager said this week about the Trey Lance trade predicament. John Lynch taking calls on Lance was probably the worst kept secret since the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. I know the 49ers have listened. Lance is still young, on a rookie deal. He's pretty talented. Sam Darnold has tons of incentives in his deal, and Purdy has the elbow problem. I think it would take a pretty strong offer to get Trey Lance. And I agree with that. And that's why the timing in the situation of trading away Lance doesn't really make a lot of sense. If Brock Purdy were 100% healthy and he was the bona fide starter for this football team heading into 2023, and he was able to partake in every offseason activity, then trading Trey Lance would make a great deal of sense. But the fact that there's so much uncertainty and there's so many concerns around Purdy's rehabilitation process on that elbow, if he's not right and can't play all of 2023, you're telling me that a Super Bowl contending team in San Francisco, one of the best rosters in the National Football League, is going to have Sam Darnold as their starting quarterback? I understand that Kyle Shanahan has maximized and brought the best out of guys like C.J. Beathard, Nick Mullins, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Brock Purdy. But come on now. Sam Darnold, the track record is out. Do I think he has a lot of potential? Do I think that he can reclaim his career to a certain degree? Yes. But is he going to lead you to a Super Bowl? No. As for the latest Trey Lance odds, the Titans, leaders in the clubhouse here. A couple of ties between Lance and that organization because Rand Carthen, their new general manager, after he was the director of pro personnel with San Francisco, and he had been in this front office since 2017 as part of the Shanahan and John Lynch regime. There's been a paper trail behind the Minnesota Vikings because according to Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, The Niners and Vikings talked at the NFL Combine, and that was a big rumor there that maybe they were thinking about exchanging Trey Lance for Kirk Cousins. Atlanta Falcons have Desmond Ridder. They're in need of a quarterback. The Houston Texans have former Niners defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans. Their offensive coordinator is Bobby Slowick, who was the Niners' former pass game coordinator, so there are ties there. The Ravens make sense if they do not bring back Lamar Jackson, and the Indianapolis Colts make some sense because they don't have a quarterback. Matt Ryan is cooked, no longer on that roster, and if they don't draft somebody at number 4 in the NFL draft, they're at 12-1 odds to trade for Lance. You know what's wild when you think about it? Trey Lance has not played a full season of football since 2019. In case you've been in a bunker thinking that the world was going to end, it's now 2023. That was 4 years ago when Trey Lance last played a full season. You can imagine why San Francisco might be concerned by that. Before we move forward with some of the latest trade rumors around some of these other players that we previewed earlier on the show, a reminder, going to be going live for the entire third round of the NFL Draft next Friday. Make sure you subscribe and join us. As of right now, Niners slotted with picks 99, 101 and 102. So myself and Trizzy going to be going live, Super Chat giveaways, Super Chat games, and of course, as all of these picks come in, we'll be breaking them down with some great draft analysis. Do want to pop up this tweet from Jack Hammer, who unfortunately unfollowed me on Twitter, but does do a good job of covering the Niners. He made an interesting point and posed this on Twitter. Players the Niners could trade before the end of the draft. Trey Lance, who we talked about, Brandon Aiyuk, Elijah Mitchell, Javon Kinlaw. Those latter 3 players, we're going to get to them around the corner, but since Jack Hammer unfollowed me on Twitter, I need some more followers on Twitter. I'm kidding, Jack. It's all good. I might not be for you. I still appreciate your work. Elon Musk took my Twitter blue check mark away on Twitter, so help me out. Give me a follow, and I'm just kidding. In all seriousness, I do like to interact with all of you on social media. To the latest on Brandon Aiyuk here. Why Brandon Aiyuk could get dealt, and why we've continued to talk about it. Can the Niners afford to pay Aiyuk the deal that he will be seeking, that he will covet, inevitably after this year? Let's talk about it. 49ers have until May 1 to exercise his 5th-year option. If they do exercise that 5th-year option, that would pay Aiyuk $14.12 million in 2024. You can exercise that 5th-year option for first-round picks. Aiyuk, a first-round selection back in 2020, alongside Javon Kinlaw in that draft class. Aiyuk right now is going to be entering year 4, So excuse that, entering year 4. And according to Matt Mayoko, NBC Sports Bay Area, he had this conversation with Jennifer Lee Chan, also of NBC Sports Bay Area. And they were talking about this. Down the road, there are issues at wide receiver. You're paying Deebo Samuel a handsome salary, and at some point you're going to have to pay Brandon Aiyuk a lot of money. And if you can't let him walk for free. If you trade him away, you get some really good compensation back, either a player and or draft capital. And Mayoko said he would not be surprised if in the NFL draft this year, next week, if the Niners drafted a wide receiver. John Lynch did say from the NFL Scouting Combine and a couple of times throughout this offseason that the Niners have repeatedly been approached about trading Aiyuk because teams are really interested in him, as evidenced by the numbers that we're about to show you in a moment. My take on Brandon Aiyuk: I don't think it's smart or wise to trade Brandon Aiyuk. And why is that? It doesn't make any sense. The 49ers are one of the best teams in the NFL. They have one of the most talented rosters in this league. Their Super Bowl window is alive and well right now. And if you exercise Aiyuk's 5th-year option with the deadline coming up on May 1, just after the NFL draft, you have 2 more years of team control, having one of the most underrated, most productive, and in my opinion, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL under team control for an affordable price over the next 2 years. So why move him right now? The conversation about trading Brandon Aiyuk doesn't make sense right now in this current moment. Now, after next year, when the Niners still don't have a first-round pick, that's when it could make some sense, especially if Aiyuk takes yet another leap, because every year he's been in the NFL, that production has increased. Trading Aiyuk could depend on the development this upcoming season of Danny Gray. the third-round selection out of SMU in the 2022 draft, who barely did anything as a rookie in 2022. But in the preseason, we saw some of the flashes of why the Niners took him in the third round. Very good speed, a guy who can take the top off of the defense, and because he was a third-round pick, he too, very affordable. If Danny Gray pops off and takes a huge leap in 2023, he still would be under team control for 2 more years. Do you trade away Brandon Aiyuk? Then Danny Gray becomes your number 2, and then you draft a receiver either this year or next year to round out that receiving core. Let's also think about it in this regard, right? The Niners need a right tackle desperately. Are you telling me that Colton McKivitz is going to start at right tackle or Jalen Moore? I don't think so, right? So in trading Aiyuk this year, you could get yourself a very, very good right tackle in this league for a team that doesn't necessarily need one, but a team that does have a need for one of the preeminent wide receivers in this league. You look at the highest paid wide receivers in the NFL right now, and given that the salary cap is going to continue to increase, Aiyuk could be in this stratosphere if he surpasses 1,000 yards once again. And if that's the case, with Deebo Samuel number 8 on this list, making a base salary of $23.9 million, can you afford to pay $40 to $50 million to 2 wide receivers? That would be very difficult because you're going to have to pay Nick Bosa a lot, paying Fred Warner a lot, paying George Kittle and Trent Williams a lot of money, as well as a guy like Kyle Juszczyk. Now, I don't think he's going to make $30 million per year, but this goes to show you in the neighborhood of what Aiyuk could demand. Why? Because he's progressively gotten better every year that he's been in the NFL, and his growth has been really, really impressive. That's a credit to him, working, grinding, getting in the lab, and iron sharpening iron with his game, but also it's a credit to this organization for developing wide receivers. They've been able to do it with Deebo, been able to do it with Jawan Jennings. They're doing it right now with Brandon Aiyuk. Year 1, 60 grabs, 768 yards, 5 touchdowns. Year 2, started off in the doghouse, but finished really strong. 56 catches, 826 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And then in year 3, best year yet. 78 grabs, career high. 1,015 yards, career high, and a career high 8 touchdowns for a guy who is a goal line to goal line weapon. So what would you do? Get in the shoes of John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan. They're having these conversations right now because teams are calling them about this. T for trade, K for keep. What would you do with Aiyuk right now? As for Elijah Mitchell, the thought process with trading Elijah Mitchell, this is a player who I really like. He's just been injured way too much. When he's on the field, a bunch of talent. Only 45 carries last year for 279 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is one of the better backup running backs in the game. But he's been injured too much. And if a team has a huge need for a running back, could they offer you a day 3 pick for Elijah Mitchell where you could get a solid player? Or if you draft a running back in the 3rd round, then maybe that opens up an opportunity to trade Mitchell. That's the thought here. Christian McCaffrey is your RB1. I love what I saw from Jordan Mason last year. He can be your RB2. 2 different styles there between CMC and Jordan Mason. You have the do-it-all, dual-threat back, and then the ground-and-pound guy who will knock your helmet off in Jordan Mason. You draft an RB3. You also have Ty Davis-Price. Maybe you trade away Elijah Mitchell. And for Javon Kinlaw, maybe a team has a big need for a defensive tackle, and they think that bringing in this physical specimen who hasn't lived up to the expectations yet could reap big dividends. The size is there. Guy 6'5", 319, looks as though he was built in a lab. But he's barely played so far in his NFL career. 4 tackles, 0 sacks, 0 tackles for loss last year. Not ideal for a guy who was drafted in the 1st round back in 2020. And the production has been lackluster in his career because he's barely been able to stay healthy. The thought, lastly, with Javon Kinlaw, is that if a team is desperate for a defensive tackle, like the Las Vegas Raiders, right now they're starting Jerry Tillery, who's been a bust so far. Maybe they would trade a day 3 pick for Kinlaw. You signed Javon Hargrave. So does that spell the end of Kinlaw here? It could. Before we wrap up this segment, if you helped us get to 80,000 subscribers, we want to thank you because that means that you are a real one. If you're watching us live, this is our 80,000 subscriber celebration. We appreciate all the support. We're going to continue to knock it out of the park with all of our content. Thank you so much for everything that you do for us.